Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a centuries-old conflict that has steadily and violently escalated into what is literally an existential threat to the survival of Pakistan. I mean, if you're looking at the headlines right now, there's one crisis that just completely dominates the conversation, and that's the situation in Balochistan. So how did we get here? Well, we're going to unpack the whole shebang using the historical facts, the treaties, and the economic data. Let's get right into it.
To really understand the stakes here, we first have to look at the deep resolve of this movement. Will not bow, will not sell, will only fight. That is a powerful, unified rallying cry echoing across the region today, and it perfectly encapsulates a resistance that has completely stopped relying on political dialogue, right? They've fully embraced armed struggle. So, the crucial question we have to ask is this: why is Pakistan's largest province fighting to become a completely separate nation? Think about it. This is a region incredibly rich in resources, sharing critical borders with Iran and Afghanistan. How did the relationship between the central government and this massive province deteriorate so completely that an entire population is out there demanding its own sovereign country? To see just how severe things have become, consider the number 72. That represents the 72 coordinated military-style attacks executed by the newly formed Baloch National Army in the year 2025 alone. 72. This isn't just scattered random unrest anymore. No, this proves that what we're looking at is a highly organized war. Two distinct armed forces clashing head-to-head. Let's look at one of the most explosive recent incidents to put this into perspective. Back in March 2025, the Jafar Express, which was carrying 450 passengers from Quetta to Peshawar, was hijacked at the Bolan Pass. Fighters used an 8-kilogram IED to actually derail the train. Now, they released the women, children, and Baloch passengers, but took others hostage, which led to a massive military operation. The result? Severe casualties on both sides and a huge spike in military drone surveillance over the entire province. Section 1. The historic Khanate origins. To understand the present, we have to realize that the roots here run deep. Way back in the 12th century, a leader named Mir Jalal Khan managed to unite 44 isolated tribes into a single alliance for mutual protection. Fast forward a bit to 1666, and these tribes were squeezed between the massive Safavid and Mughal empires. They realized, hey, we need a centralized authority to survive. So they appointed Mir Ahmad Khan as their first head. And by 1749, under Mir Nasir Khan, they actually entered a golden era, boasting a highly organized system and a standing army of 25,000 soldiers. This centralized authority became known as the Khanate of Kalat. And what's absolutely crucial to note here is the structure of their government. You see, the Khanate wasn't just some loose tribal gathering. It was a functional, organized, and totally independent sovereign state. They even had a parliament-like council system where tribal leaders, known as sardars, had a real voice in massive decisions. They managed their own affairs, their own laws, and their own military completely independently. Section 2. The British Buffer Zone. During this era, Britain and Russia were locked in the Great Game, which was basically a fierce geopolitical rivalry. The British, who were ruling neighboring India, were terrified of Russian expansion through Central Asia and Afghanistan. They needed a strategic buffer zone. So, in 1839, the British violently attacked Kalat to force a military route right into Afghanistan. Over the next few decades, the British used a mix of military force and diplomacy to assert influence. This eventually led to the 1876 Treaty of Kalat, which formally recognized the Khanate's independence while simultaneously carving out a direct British stronghold in 1887. Now, this created a really fractured reality. The British essentially split the area right in two. On one side, you had British Balochistan. These were strategic routes like Quetta and the Bolan Pass that the British directly leased and controlled with their military. But on the other side was the remaining Khanate of Kalat, which the British treated as an indirectly ruled, legally independent state under that treaty. This specific, highly complex legal distinction is exactly what perfectly sets the stage for the massive border disputes of 1947. Section 3. Partition and Annexation. Now here is an incredible piece of historical irony. In 1946, the man who would go on to actually found Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, acted as the legal advisor for the Khan of Kalat. Jinnah himself drafted a memorandum to the British cabinet mission, legally arguing that Kalat was never formally a part of the British Empire, and therefore it should revert to an entirely independent, sovereign state once the British left. Pretty wild, right? But, as you might guess, things changed rapidly once Pakistan was actually created. Here is the specific phased playbook Pakistan utilized to annex Kalat. Step 1. On August 4th, 1947, Pakistan signed a standstill agreement, officially recognizing Kalat's independence. Okay, straightforward. But then, Step 2, Pakistan began bypassing the Khan entirely, striking direct deals with neighboring tribal Sardars to absorb their lands. This legally and geographically isolated Kalat. Then, Step 3, Pakistan deployed naval and military forces to surround the area. And finally, Step 4, on March 27, 1948, under immense military pressure, the Khan of Kalat was taken to Karachi and forced to sign the document of accession. Section 4. A Cycle of Rebellion.
Almost immediately, the pushback began. In 1948, the Khan's brother, Prince Abdul Karim, launched a guerrilla war right from the hills. Moving into the 1950s, Pakistan introduced something called the one-unit policy, which quite literally erased the name Balochistan from the map, lumping it all into West Pakistan. As you can imagine, this sparked absolute fury. In 1958, an 80-year-old tribal leader, Nawab Noroz Khan, led a massive rebellion. And a really unique trait of the Baloch is that their leaders historically fight from the front lines, right alongside their families. Despite brief moments of democracy, like the 1970 elections, by 1973, the civilian government in Balochistan was banned entirely, and a brutal military crackdown was initiated.
So the crucial point that drives the deep-seated anger today is this heavy legacy of broken promises. The source materials detail a major historical grievance held by the Baloch people. On multiple occasions, including the rebellions of Prince Abdul Karim and Nawab Noroz Khan, Pakistani forces lured rebel leaders down from the mountains using false oaths sworn on the Quran, promising them amnesty. But once they actually surrendered, they were immediately imprisoned or executed. This perceived betrayal completely destroyed any foundation of trust. Section 5. Resources, Exploitation, and Resistance.
Bringing it back to today, the crisis isn't just about historical identity anymore, it is deeply fueled by stark economic disparity. Just take the Rico Dig project as an example. This is a massive 42 million ton reserve of gold and copper. But look at how the profits are split. It's severe. 50% went to China, 48% went to the central government of Pakistan, and the local province of Balochistan, where the resources actually are, received a mere 2%. 2%. And this dynamic repeated itself with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. This was a $60 billion infrastructure investment centered around the Gwadar port in Balochistan. The huge promise was that Gwadar would become the next Dubai, but instead, local fishermen were displaced and their livelihoods were completely disrupted. The high-paying jobs largely went to Chinese engineers and workers from Punjab, while permanent military settlements were established just to protect the foreign assets. So the local population felt completely marginalized on their own land. This severe economic frustration tied perfectly into their historical grievances. Decades of feeling ignored and exploited basically forced fractured militant groups to rethink their entire strategy. They realized that scattered guerrilla tactics just weren't working anymore. So they merged. Various armed factions united to form the Baloch Raji Ajowi Sangar, which ultimately birthed the Baloch National Army, or BNA. They evolved from isolated tribes into a single, unified, and highly lethal military force, one capable of executing the massive, coordinated attacks we're seeing today. So, what does this all mean for the future? We're now looking at a heavily armed movement in a province that borders Iran and Afghanistan, sitting on billions in resources. With the looming strategic interests of China protecting its investments, India watching closely, and the United States eyeing the region as a counter to Iran, the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Will these foreign interests ultimately help turn Balochistan into a completely new sovereign nation, or are we simply looking at the world's next great devastating proxy battleground? It's a highly complex reality, and the survival of a nuclear-armed Pakistan hangs entirely in the balance. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.